Thank you for coming to Starbright Storytime. Today's book is Stretch to the Sun, From a Tiny Sprout to the Tallest Tree on Earth by Carrie A. Pearson, illustrated by Susan Swan. Stretch to the Sun, From a Tiny Sprout to the Tallest Tree on Earth by Carrie A. Pearson, illustrated by Susan Swan. To all the trees I've climbed, read books in and rested beneath, and to my parents who showed me the importance of nature. Ferocious winter winds blow through a forest of coast redwood trees. Branches clatter, twigs break, limbs careen down, down, down. The giant redwood bends from the force of the wind. Creak, crack, boom! The giant tree falls, broken, and the forest floor trembles. Clods of dirt and chunks of wood fly hundreds of feet. Then, quiet. Just a whisper of wind, just a rustle of leaves, just a chirp from a bird. Then the sound of rain, drip, drip, dripping on the ground for months, until dewy spring air wakes the forest and, pop, a tiny tree no bigger than a pinky finger sprouts from the stump of the fallen tree. The sprout needs light, so it stretches toward the sun. The sprout needs water, so it reaches out thin roots to pull moisture from the damp duff. Autumn leaves drop to the ground, decay, and help create soil. Then cold winter rain drizzles on the leaves and soaks the forest floor. Spring bees visit, helping to create more plants to protect the sprout's roots. Heavy summer fog supplies moisture. When the sun shines through, larger trees shield the tiny one. Every season, every year, just enough light and just enough water feed the sprout until 600 years later. It isn't so little anymore. Intertwining roots pull moisture inside the tree, where it travels up, up, up to the tippy top, more than 200 feet high. At the tree's crown, branches form platforms that collect leaves, bark, and smaller limbs. The debris turns to soil. Birds and animals visit the tree and drop seeds in that soil. Now huckleberry bushes and ferns inch toward the sky. Lichens and mosses make blankets over the branches. Wandering salamanders hide in cool notches. Northern flying squirrels soar from limb to limb. Marbled murrelet birds feed their chicks in mossy hollows 200 feet high. Branches crisscross with other giants and form a canopy, a unique, wondrous world. The once tiny tree grows taller each season. One day the sky darkens. Rain pours and a bolt of lightning rips through the clouds and strikes the ground near the tree. Crack, hiss, sizzle, roar. Fire engulfs the area, destroying many trees, but the once tiny tree's bark is so thick that it survives with only black scars. The tree grows taller still. For hundreds of years, the tree is busy with life, but the forest is quiet until not deer, not cougar, not black bear. Rustle, crunch, stomp. Horse hooves and human footsteps. People scout the forest for trees to harvest for lumber as soon as good roads are built. Without roads, there's no harvesting. Not yet. Decades later, good roads are built near the tree. Powerful yellow lights pierce the night. Not starlight, not moonlight, not light from the aurora borealis. Flashlights and headlights. Exhaust clouds the air as saws carve through huge trunks. The tangy, sharp scent of cut evergreen mixes with bitter fumes. The ground near the once tiny tree shudders as other ancient redwoods crash. Tractors haul trees out of the forest, crushing everything in their paths. But soon, across the country in Washington, D.C., people listen to a different sound. Pen on paper. The pen is held by the President of the United States as he signs a law protecting ancient trees. The loud noises stop as suddenly as they started. Protected from harvest, the tree grows older and taller. One day, humble voices, measuring tapes, camera clicks. Explorers look for tall trees all over the world, and here they find one. At 379.1 feet, it is the tallest one ever discovered. Scientists study the once tiny sprout that survived and grew to be the tallest of the tall. The author's note says this book began with a question. My mother asked me, "Do you know what's going on in the tops of redwood trees?" She had watched a documentary about the tallest tree ever found and thought I'd be interested. I watched it, and she was right. I knew children would want to learn about the tallest tree species in the world. First, I researched the topic by reading books from the library and using the internet. When I knew what questions to ask, I began primary research by contacting tall tree scientists and researchers. Then I received a grant from the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, to travel from my home in Michigan to Redwood National Park in California. James B. Wheeler, a park ranger and interpreter for the National Park Service for more than 30 years, was my guide. He shared his knowledge and love for coast redwoods. Later, He reviewed several drafts of the manuscript and provided expert information. My inspiration grew from his words. Every tree has a story to tell. Facts about coast redwoods. A tiny tree, no bigger than a pinky finger, sprouts from the stump of the fallen tree. We don't know if the tree in this book came from a seed or a sprout. New coast redwood trees can grow from seeds that trees produce, or from sprouts that emerge from the base of a stump, a fallen branch, or a burl, a rounded knot on the tree with dormant buds. More trees grow from sprouts because seeds aren't released every year, and it takes the right conditions for them to grow. If the tree in this book did come from a sprout, it means that every one of its cells is a perfect copy, a clone, of the original tree. The sprout needs water so it reaches out thin roots to pull moisture from the damp duff. When fallen leaves, sticks, and plants decay, a rich layer of organic matter, called duff, is created. Duff absorbs water like a sponge and provides crucial moisture for the tree's roots. At the tree's crown, branches form platforms that collect leaves, bark, and smaller limbs. When branches or trunks break off, coast redwoods grow new ones. This is called reiteration and is an important part of how redwood trees survive for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. Branches crisscross with other giants and form a canopy, a unique, wondrous world. The canopy is the top layer in a forest where the crowns of trees overlap. In a redwood forest, the canopy is very high off the ground, and until scientists found a way to climb using ropes and pulleys, no one knew what was up there. Research began at Humboldt State University in 1996 with the work of Stephen Sillett, Scott Sillett, and Marie Antoine. What they found was astonishing. Northern flying squirrels live in cracks or holes in the trees. They spread the thin skin between their legs to trap air and then float from tree to tree. Wandering salamanders are amphibians that live and breed in canopy soils and in cracks in tree bark. They do not have lungs and must keep their skin moist to breathe, so they come out only when the air is full of moisture. Marbled murrelets, an endangered bird species, nest in coast redwoods and feed on fish from the nearby Pacific Ocean. Canopy plants and lichens like Leproloma membranacea provide food for the many insect species that live far above the ground. For hundreds of years, the tree is busy with life, but the forest is quiet. Thousands of years before the tree in this book sprouted, the coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, forest grew along the Pacific coast from California to Oregon. Several Native American tribes lived within the forests and used fallen trees for building materials and canoes, but by and large the forests remained undisturbed. People scout the forest for trees to harvest for lumber as soon as good roads are built. In 1848, the gold rush began, and thousands of people traveled west to seek their fortune. Trees were needed to make houses, boats, and buildings. Coast redwoods provide excellent lumber because they split easily and are fire and insect resistant. Over time, redwood was used for railroad cars and ties, coffins, water and wine vats, water pipes, furniture, shingles, window frames, doors, bridges, decks, wharf pilings, fences, and insulation. By the late 1800s, people recognized that the ancient trees were disappearing quickly. John C. Merriam, Henry Fairfield Osborne, and Madison Grant established the Save the Redwoods League in 1918. The League's mission is still to protect and restore redwood forests and connect people with their peace and beauty, so these wonders of the natural world flourish. The League saved thousands of trees by purchasing land on which they grew, but sadly, millions more were not on protected land. Timber cruisers traveled through the thick woods, sometimes on horseback, selected trees to harvest, and marked them with paint. This paint still can be seen on some trees today. Loggers followed with axes, chains, and saws. Oxen, horses, and mules pulled the trees out of the forest to flumes, water-filled ditches, rivers, or rail cars. The trees eventually made it to lumber mills. When redwood harvesting began in the late 1800s, there were more than 2 million acres of old-growth redwood forests. By 1968, 9 out of 10 trees were gone forever. But soon, across the country in Washington, D.C., people listened to a different sound: pen on paper. After many years negotiating with the timber industry, the U.S. Congress created Redwood National Park on October 2, 1968, which placed tens of thousands of acres in the care of the National Park Service. Then in 1978, as modern-day loggers worked around the clock to harvest timber, President Jimmy Carter signed a law that expanded Redwood National Park by another 48,000 acres. Today, fewer than 120,000 acres of old-growth coast redwoods remain. The National Park Service, the Save the Redwoods League, the Sempervirens Fund, and many other organizations and individuals continue to work on behalf of coast redwoods. Scientists study the once tiny sprout that survived and grew to be the tallest of the tall. Tall tree explorers Chris Atkins and Michael Taylor found the tree in this book on August 25, 2006. Researchers later determined it is the world's tallest known living tree. The last time the tree was measured, it was 380.25 feet tall, and no one knows how much more it will grow. The second tallest tree is still growing as well, and there is a chance it may grow even faster. It's a race to the clouds. The locations of both trees are kept secret to protect them. Although scientists named the tallest trees as they were discovered, they now regret that practice because it called additional attention to the trees and in some cases caused harm to the delicate ecosystem. The coast redwood community requests that we learn about these ancient champions from afar and allow them to grow undisturbed. More information. Learn more. Visit Big Basin Redwood State Park, Boulder Creek, California. Del Norte Coast Redwoods State Park, 7 miles south of Crescent City, California. Humboldt Redwood State Park, Wyatt, California. Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park, 9 miles east of Crescent City, California. Prairie Creek Redwoods State Park, Humboldt County, near Oric, California. Redwood National and State Parks, Crescent City, California. This has been a very educational book. I hope that you enjoyed this book about trees. A story of survival, a story of strength. This is Stretch to the Sun, from a tiny sprout to the tallest tree on earth, by Carrie A. Pearson, illustrated by Susan Swan. Text copyright 2018 by Carrie A. Pearson. Illustrations copyright 2018 by Swan. Published by Charlesbridge, Watertown, Massachusetts, USA. Thank you for coming to Starbright Storytime.